drunk a lot, he was a different person, but in his early life, he would often just sit in the back of the room and he'd always have his little breast pocket notebooks with him and just be jotting down. A lot of times he wouldn't take part in parties. He was a great listener. It wasn't that he was drawing people out so much as he was a great observer and a great listener. And also always taking those notes, always writing in the notebook when everything that he would hear and see so that he wouldn't forget. I mean, he was certainly likable, but he was also very shy. I mean, it wasn't like he was actively drawing people out. It was more, well, I mean, people liked him. He was certainly charismatic. He was a football player. He was handsome, and everybody knew about his talent. Supposedly when he did speak, his words were amazing. I mean, he would just come out with sentences that sounded like poems. He just had this amazing command of being. So people were charmed by him, but I think that was part of it. And part of it was his sincerity, too. I mean, Kerouac, I think, always came across as not somebody like Tom Wolfe, the journalist who was there in the white suit and clearly trying to make a career and so on. And people understood that Jack Kerouac, he was a very spiritual man, very much of a devout Catholic most of his life, believed in the spirituality of life, believed that the writers had a duty to tell the holy truth of life. People sensed that sincerity, that he wasn't writing for money. He never was writing for money. That he really wanted to tell some truth about life, and that I think got people to open up to him as well. The sincerity of what he was doing. Yeah.
How did Jack Kerouac come from, first he wanted to be accepted by the mainstream, and then he totally rejected it, and then on Last Story, he didn't plan for money?
He didn't plan for what?
I mean, when he was out in San Francisco, he didn't even think about money to pay for his trip or his life.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question about Jack Kerouac wanting acceptance. Is that what you said? And then sort of rejecting it? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, I mean, Jack Kerouac had a very high sense of the writer. I mean, he felt that, again, that, he loved Balzac, he loved all these great chroniclers of human life, and he felt that these sort of people should be honored, the great writers, and of course in France they put up statues to Balzac and all that, and so he felt that, he was a great writer. He knew that he was spending his whole life really writing millions of words, recording huge swaths of American life. He felt he should be honored for that, but instead he didn't become famous until the media picked him up as the king of the beats. So he became famous for the wrong reasons. I mean, that's part of what happened to him. He wanted to be respected as a great writer like Balzac, okay? Instead, he's respected as a leader of beatniks, as a cult figure. And it was the wrong reason. He didn't want that. He wanted, like, look at my writing. Look at what a great writer I am. Oh, no, you're the handsome king of the beats. And that totally spun him around to a point where he became sick with the media glamorizing him and missing the whole message of what he was writing. I think that's why toward the end of his life he just turned his back on society and the media and everything, because it was like, you guys just aren't getting my message. You don't understand what I'm really trying to do. And so he sort of gave up on the fact that they're not going to build a statue to me, not in my lifetime. He always felt that after he died that people would write books about him. They'll understand me later, but they don't understand me now. And of course it's true. After he died, they started writing biographies about him. Did that answer your question? I don't know if I did or not. Yeah, back then.
I guess I was interested in, did your mother tell these stories when you were young? And I'm interested in how you collaborated too on this.
Well, we collaborated because Jerry was trying to find out a little bit of background about my mother, her younger life before she met Jack and Neil, and then later when she dropped out of the beat scene and moved to the suburbs where I was born. I was born in the city, but she moved to the suburbs and raised a daughter quietly, kept most of this away from me. I was not aware that my mother was Mary Lou in the book till I was well into my 20s. I had no idea. I knew a lot of the stories. I knew about her trip to New York. I knew the stories as you know your parents' stories when you're growing up. You don't pay a whole lot of attention to them. And we didn't have a lot of the Neil, Ginsberg. Those people were not in and out of my mother's life when I was young. I met Neil Cassidy once when I was 16 years old, which was a little bit later. You know, he was into the
Bus.
the Ken Kesey, the Grateful Dead. The Bus was outside, you know, and my mother was quite, she was not your typical PTA mom. We had a lot of characters who were in and out of the house when I was young, so it wasn't unusual to have writers and, you know, just a lot of jazz people up all night, morning and night. But Neil came to the house, knocked on the door. I was home alone with my boyfriend at the time, and he was, you know, kind of wild and crazy and seemed like a speed freak to me. And I was like, no, who is this crazy person that my mother knows? And he said, "Is Luann home?" "I'm Neil. I'm your mother's first husband." And then proceeded to say, "And you're not nearly as pretty as Al Hinkle told me you were." You know, which I've come to try and figure out that he probably was looking at me. I was the same age at 16 as my mother was when he married her, when they went to New York. So I'm sure in his mind he was kind of, you know, measuring me, kind of comparing me. But, you know, to me he was just like this man that was loaded, and, you know, and I just told my mother, you know, who is this guy? And the only thing she said to me was, I was married when I was, you know, young. I was 15 years old back in Denver. It lasted a couple of years. I got divorced from him, and I met your dad. And that was the extent of that conversation at 16. But you have to remember, I lived in San Francisco. Haight-Ashbury was going on at the time. You know, I was going down there buying earrings and peasant skirts and this and that. So my mother wasn't going to give me any ammunition saying, oh yeah, I left home at 16 years old. I went to New York and I was out running around with these guys and smoking weed. And yeah, she was not going to tell me anything like that. So the stories came out slowly over the years, and you know, the characterization of my mother was not that positive. It's a little hard to explain to a teenage daughter when you read the book, you know, about just this ditzy blonde, you know, loose, whatever. I mean, but she wasn't. She was the first wife. And they were just trying to, you know, make a living, you know, move ahead, and they wanted to go to school. He wanted to be a writer. You know, they had an idea of what they wanted to do. They were just very young, and so the characterization of my mother was not very positive. She was, you know, she didn't want to defend herself to her own child. So it took many years for it all to come out, and, you know, and it wasn't a big deal around my house. Everyone knew, but she never really made a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
I know that the central figures of the Beat Generation.
A little louder.
I know that the central figures of the Beat Generation, Kerouac, Neil, Ginsberg, and Burroughs, were obsessed with this idea of the new vision. And I guess my question is, what is the new vision, and what was the role of women in the new vision?
Well, that's a great question. He asked, Kerouac and all of his friends in the 40s were always saying, we have to find the new vision, we have to achieve the new vision. And he asked, the questioner asked me, what was the new vision, and what was the role of women in the new vision? They got the new vision from Rimbaud. They used to read Rimbaud to each other in French mostly. And Rimbaud talks about making all things new, and Christmas on Earth, and basically just turning everything upside down, seeing things in a new way. What is the phrase he uses? I can't think. I'm getting old now. I can't remember things anymore. But basically, Rimbaud. There's a line in Rimbaud where he talks about just kind of breaking down everything that exists, so that you can find a new truth. Jim Morrison probably stole from that and break on through to the other side. I mean, it's the same idea. Break through what's here now to get to something that you don't know, but that you think is waiting out there somewhere. But you're right. It was mostly guys sitting around this apartment talking about it. you know, Lucian Carr and Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and later Neil Cassidy and Hal Chase and William Burroughs.